future of mobility, right? Like when I think about a cityscape as someone who has made a bet on cities, like I think cities, wherever they are globally, are the places where you're going to find people pushing things forward, however one defines that, right? And what do we want our cities to look like, feel like, and be as livable, workable, functional spaces for human beings?
And I working with a lot of people working in that department.
Yeah, and I think if, like, again, if I'm Uber, if I'm advising Uber or any company around mobility, I'm thinking about when spaces are not defined as mobile by any sort of car, whether it's driven by a human being or not. So to me, the automated car conversation as a piece of futurism doesn't factor in the idea of how livable I want my city spaces to be. If I look at a city like New York,
of course,
but if I look at New York, for example, we're closing streets to cars, right? So the mobility piece now takes on a social piece of walking, making livable spaces for people. So if I'm looking at mobile, I have to think about that, not just the technology,
but there's
of getting people from
my argument on this is that you're looking at it one angle, and we're looking at it from
no, I'm trying to look at them at all.
There's all angles, but there's one angle there, for example, what you just mentioned, and that is that as we go towards automation, you're going to look at asset sharing in a sense. There's going to be no need to actually own a car. There's just going to be get into something that's moving and get it, just like public transportation. It's going to be privatized, which means that you're going to have a much less drop in ownership of cars, which is going to open up and get rid of all the parking spaces that you see. Yes. So it's going to be there's all sorts of these little things that just affect one another as they move through.
I agree with that 100%.
If we're on the subject of Uber, look at Uber Eats, for example. What do I see from Uber Eats is in the future, a lot of people are going to stop cooking at home. The cost of cooking at home is going to be a lot more expensive than dining out. Dining out is going to be a lot cheaper.
Already for one person in most individual cities, the income for a person individual, it's cheaper to go out and eat than it is for the wastage and cooking of food in the home.
So companies that are like Uber Eats will help people dine at home, and actually, I believe also dining out will decline more. With technology, not only that it reduces the cost, but at the same time, it makes everything accessible and makes convenience. At the same time, by nature, we human beings are, unless somebody pushes us, we're lazy.
Actually, there's a great, if you guys ever remember seeing Fifth Element.
Yes.
Okay, there's a great actual, the beginning of the episode is where the guy is actually in his house, he opens the window, but the actual flying van is the sushi van that comes directly to his house.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of element of where the restaurant comes to you, in a sense, versus going to the restaurant. All of this is very good, but I think the main mindset still here is this, is to embrace certain elements as a top-level executive of a legacy existing company that's been around for a long time, how to prevent themselves from being disrupted and brought down by somebody in a garage somewhere.
Even if we go back to the term disruptive, okay, it's repetitive. Everyone uses it. Even the term loses meaning, So when you come and apply a term that's been overused, you come and apply it, you enjoy the term, and you want to apply it, you're lost between disruptive and futurism. What's the definition of disruptive, and what's the definition of futurism? Mm-hmm. So you're caught in terms over the actions. And what happens at the top level? You set up an SBU, strategic business unit, as a core team. And your job is disruptive. No, your job is not disruptive. Your job is futurism, because disruptive is instant. Futurism, it keeps you creating values. There's constant.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
I see what you're saying.
And that's where I see a lot of the problems. I go back to a point that Yaz has raised in the beginning of futurism, which I absolutely love it. The mindset.
Yeah.
It all starts from the mindset. It all starts from the fear in the heart. Well, I'm in a comfort. We're doing great. What's the average thing? All of us are consultants. We travel the world. We meet different clients. But here's the thing. What do we often listen to? Most things that come out of the CEO office is, we're doing great, and any change that comes could ruin us. So there's fear.
Yeah. So
it's fear. How do you change that mindset towards fear? And how, like we used the other day, you said, we talked about, what was it? Toys R Us. You said Toys R Us problem was not only change, but there was a lot to Toys R Us than change.
Yeah.
Right? And who would you
Yeah, I think you were
hold-
saying, which is a very good point there, they didn't offer experience, which is another futurism.
Exactly.
thing.
But
The-
who's responsible for all these things, whether it's change or futuristic
CEO.
or whether the CEO?
Yeah.
So if we go back and say, how do we see the future? We're able to visualize the future. But it's useless if the leadership on top.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cannot
But
visualize
that's
that.
another thing that's being forced. I mean, right now you've got these companies in Silicon Valley around the world that are just absolute level playing fields. There is absolutely no management. No management whatsoever, because they've seen that people tend to gravitate towards something they like doing. That
But also they're
capable of
scaled
doing.
down numbers.
Scaled down, greater happiness at workplace, less friction, more time package deliveries.
Yes.
Everything is just positive, positive, positive. Now that's incredibly difficult to put into the mindset of somebody who's struggled their entire life, who's given a huge money of their assets to go to Duke, no offense, to go to any of these nice companies,
Yes.
colleges. As I've had, George Washington, $200,000. I didn't even finish. Can you imagine? I mean, that was the money that you don't even get. So all of this money's gone into it. You got your education. You're looking for that, golden parachute, that great company, a CEO. You get there, and what? I'm not going to have the nice office and the nice car. I'm going to be there with everybody else.
That's priority.
That's a difficult mindset to change for a lot of people.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So
because you're buying into the perception, not the values.
yeah, exactly.
You know?
So
And
the
that's all
CEO
gonna
of
shift
my
as well.
my CEO of the future is the one bringing the coffee to people, saying, "Hey, if you got everything
Exactly.
you need, can
Absolutely.
have I made your job here easier to produce so that it's helping me?" Well, the job of the future is to find somebody better than you are, because you're so locked into that company that company should benefit you no matter what you do, even if you're not the CEO, because you stepped down, you found somebody better. Yeah, that's the altruistic way that it should provide.
But again, there's two battles. If we're going to talk about futurism, and we talked about the other day about the CEO being in the center, which you raised a point, rather than having him sit on top and just have a separate office while the management side, the operational side, you said, I would like to see him in the center in doing things. Now, if you talk about futurism, if the CEO is not leading and he believes that he's not hands-on because there's a lot of other things he needs to take care of, how do you expect futurism to happen? It won't happen because he's a leader.
Your job has got to, and it defines, how do people define leadership, right? Is it to direct people in a particular way and give them orders and have those orders followed and all the rest of it? Or is it to empower people, to, again, that incentive, right? Everyone in the organization should feel incentivized to question, provoke, and be curious.
Absolutely. You should be open to all that.
Yeah,
and
if you don't have that built into the DNA of the organization, it's
you're losing.
Not,
the most smart people are probably not working for you.
Yeah.
And that's going to be the bottom line that you're going to have to be faced with, which is going to make you revisit your whole KPI structure as well, because you're going to say, why am I giving incentive for something? For example, the future for me is not to give in sales incentive just based on revenue. It's not to give incentive just based on outcome of period bottom line. It's to give incentive on goodwill, the value assessed by your nature of interacting with your employees and your consumers.
Yeah, up and down that chain.
Up and down that chain, a
above
KPI
and below you.
will give you and generate as a byproduct a much higher revenue in its natural self, and keep you focused at the core of what the business should be rather than what the end is, which usually leads to a lot of churn.
But a lot of people
there,
parachute to the end too fast.
Of course.
That's like I said, that's
Because
the
of
mindset.
the tangibles.
That's the
Looking at
mindset.
the bottom
Now,
lines.
I can safely say that mindset is changing, has changed. Startups have changed that. The whole progression of this whole the technology industry has changed that. We're seeing it all across the board with the big technology companies. None of them are the traditional legacy kind of CEOs in a sense. But that does not change the fact that you look outside of America and in the rest of the world, and you still have that kind of mindset.
Yeah.
And it is changing, it's shifting, and I know from parts in Europe that I've seen this and so forth, especially in Turkey, where it's very oligarch, kind of like, top-down management, and they say it's corporatized here, and I'm yet to see it, still one kind of owner. The only way that changes is to bring them their assets in their face, rather than as they would see it as a threat. Because that's another classical paradigm of a CEO, to recognize threats, SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, that should all change. There shouldn't be any threats. There should be opportunities constantly. It shouldn't be ever viewed as a threat.